Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. اللهم صل وسلم دائما أبدا أبدا على حبيبك خير خلقه محمد وآله وأصحابه وأهل بيته وعترته وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. Respected brothers and sisters and my dearest children, I would like to welcome everyone in our weekly series of Siratul Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, lesson number 48. And Alhamdulillah, we have gone through the entire historical facts from the time of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam all the way as to how the Ismail alayhi salam and his mother, and then how they established the so-called the Makkah Mukarrama, which is at this place. This was the place where Ibrahim alayhi salam was ordered to leave his wife and child way back 4,000 years ago. And that was a foundation laying of Makkah Mukarrama, and where Alhamdulillah Zamzam came, and then one of the tribes from Yemen, they came and they established themselves. And this is how now we find that from that time, 4,000 years ago, when there was no one there, when Allah Ta'ala gave order to Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam to build the Kaabatullah and then call the people. And at that time, he wondered, where are the people? What good is my announcing and calling the people? But subhanallah, we find over the period of 4,000 years, now how many people are there every year for Hajj and Baitullah. So this was the foundation laying of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that Allah had given the honor to Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam because of his sacrifices in life, and gave him two sons, and both of those sons, they became leaders of all the prophets who came into this world. And all from Ishaq alayhi salatu wasalam, the first son, and then Yaqub, all the Bani Israel, Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, the prophets came. And then finally from Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam, only Allah Ta'ala reserved him for our beloved Prophet Muhammadur Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And he came, and we saw that how miraculously he lived as a child, and what happened. We looked at it in detail, Alhamdulillah. I'm just briefly going through what we have covered so far. And now, after Makkah, and how he developed into a young man, and then finally at the age of 40, Allah Ta'ala decided to give him the prophethood. But this nabuwat, this prophethood was special in comparison to the other prophets, because he was now going to become the seal or the last brick in this building of prophethood, and close the door of prophethood. And this is why Allah Ta'ala has described him as the last prophet. He is the Khatamun Nabiyyin. He is the last of all the chain which came from Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. And this was done to guide mankind. for the benefit of humanity, Allah Ta'ala sent these prophets and gave the instructions of how this human body has to be used in the proper way while living in this temporary life of dunya. Right? So it was, and this obviously was an obligation on the Creator Allah Ta'ala, that because He created us, so He not only gave instructions, but He sent the prophets to explain those instructions very clearly to us by example. And finally, Allah Ta'ala sent Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and all the instructions were combined together and put together in the form of one complete and perfect holy book. And that holy book is the Quran we have. And that is the final message from Allah Ta'ala, final instructions from Allah Ta'ala, the most complete and perfect book from Allah Ta'ala for the entire humanity, not just Muslims, for the entire humanity until the end of the day, Yawmul Qiyamah. So that was the start of that, the first revelation, where Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam received at the age of 40, and then the first 13 years of his prophethood life, we looked at in detail how he spent in Mecca. And this initial stage was a struggle and full of sacrifices. And we found that Allah Ta'ala made Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam go through so much hardship, full of calamities. Not only himself, but his entire family faced, and his companions, those who were coming into the fold of Islam, all of them, they struggled until finally, after the 13 years of Nabuwa, Allah Ta'ala gave the order to make the migration, Hijrat. And of course, the help and protection of Allah Ta'ala was there for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And during this time, he had a journey, ascension towards the heavens, and which is known as Isra and Miraj. So as I mentioned in the last 3-4 lessons ago, that this hijrat from Makkah to Medina, Allah Ta'ala could have just ordered Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam and ask him to take Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam from Makkah to Medina directly within seconds, as he had already shown in the time of Isra and Miraj. But Allah Ta'ala wanted to send a message to the entire humanity until Yawmul Qiyamah, that we have to have total reliance on Allah Ta'ala. But in this life, this dunya, because it is Darul Asbab, it is connected with means and cause, everything doesn't happen at random, but it happens systematically. Allah Ta'ala, and this is the sunnat of Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala has made this sunnah for this dunya, that everything will happen. However, the yaqeen and faith we must have on Allah Ta'ala, and the total reliance has to be on Allah Ta'ala. But whenever we are attempting to do anything in this dunya, we have to try and use our mind and thoughts and try to get the best possible results, and then rely on Allah Ta'ala. Right? So this migration, we find that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with his companion Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an, he planned it to the minutest detail to show to the ummah that it's not just, Islam is not just to say, inshallah, Allah will do everything. But Islam is that first you do your best according to your ability and efforts. You try and make the full effort of whatever you are trying to achieve. And once you have done everything and done your best, then after that you say, I rely on Allah Ta'ala. And that is the way we find this entire process of migration or hijrah. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he planned it, and every step they were taking, they planned, and then they finally arrived in the outskirts of Medina Munawwara. We looked at how the whole journey he went through, keeping his mission and objective in mind, that he was a da'i ilallah, inviter. And so on the way, he was continuously inviting the people, and they were coming into the folds of Islam. And finally, as he arrived in Quba, on the outskirts, where he stayed for 3-4 days, according to uh, the riwayat, and Ibn Hisham in the book of Sirah has written that from Monday all the way up to Thursday, 4-5 days, according to one riwayat, he stayed in Quba and waiting for Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala an, and Hazrat Aisha and Hazrat Asma, the children of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an, who had accompanied him. They waited for them. And then finally, Friday, and there's a lot of discussion and difference of opinion as to when finally he arrived in Medina. But according to the majority, it seems that it was the month of Rabiul Awwal. And in those days, there were no calendars. But the Christian, according to the Christian calendar, we know that it was 622 CE, and probably the month of September, we can say approximately. However, in the Arab world, in those days, the mushrikeen, they had a system of noting special events and dates, and they would give them a name, right? Like, for example, when the Abraha attacked, we know that when he attacked, so they called it the year of the elephant. And in the same way, when Hazrat Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha passed away, and Abu Talib, uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, passed away, they referred to it as the year of grief. So in those days, they would give these special names because there was no real calendar. The calendar actually started, right, from the time of the Hijrat. Right? So when Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is arriving in Medina Munawwara finally, so, and of course, these dates have been traced back because it was in the time of Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala, several years after the Hijrat, that and the demise of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that he traced back and then made the calendar, Islamic calendar, based on the Hijri. So the first year was, the month was definitely Rabiul Awwal, probably the first week of Rabiul Awwal. And we know from the riwayat that definitely it was a Monday in the month of Rabiul Awwal, because these months, in the Arabs, they already had them. But the year became the year 1 from the date when Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam arrived in Medina Munawwara. So approximately, and according to the English calendar, it's around 622 years after Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, right? So and probably September is noted by the historians. So he is now basically arriving from Friday morning. He leaves Quba, and then he arrives in a small village which is known as the Bani Salim bin Auf, and that is where it is mentioned. Ibn Ishaq has written that he performed his first Juma Salat. Right? No, don't forget, uh, in Makkah they were not allowed to have a congregation. So Rasulullah Sallallahu first Salat, first Juma was in this small village when he waited for Hazrat Ali, and when they arrived, they all now started leaving, and they came to Bani Salim bin Auf, and that is where they performed the Juma, and then they started moving from there. Rasulullah Sallallahu sat on his camel, and the camel was actually being instructed by Allah Ta'ala. And as we find later on, Rasulullah Sallallahu mentioned, and the leaders of those tribes, as he is moving through these different villages, all of them are coming out and greeting Rasulullah Sallallahu. They are they are eager, and they are coming forward and requesting Rasulullah Sallallahu that we want you to be you are a guest for us, and we want to host you, and we want you to stay with us. But Rasulullah Sallallahu is telling everyone that my camel has been ordered by Allah Ta'ala to go, and the camel knows where it has to stop, right? So just let go of my camel, and then he passes through these different villages from Quba as he moves now, and people are gathering around a few leaders and of the tribe. They are trying their best to receive and make Rasulullah Sallallahu stay with them, but Rasulullah Sallallahu keeps moving through, the Bani Bayada, another village comes, and he moves through that, and then Bani Saada, another village, and then Bani Hars bin Khazraj, and then Bani Adi bin Najjar. So all these villages, and everywhere he's been greeted. He has been received with open arms, because they are all honoring him and giving him that respect which is due to him. And this is from Allah Ta'ala, that now, after all the struggle of the 13 years, now finally, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has come into an environment where there is peace and tranquility all around him, and people are coming forward to receive him. And then finally he comes to Bani Malik bin Najjar. And this Najjar, don't forget, this Bani Najjar is the actual tribe from where the great grandmother of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Allah Ta'ala planned it in this way, that she is from this Bani Najjar tribe, where, as we mentioned in the previous lesson or the lesson before, that the great grandfather of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who actually was on business, and then finally he decided to marry this lady, Salma, and she actually from. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam now arrives in Bani Malik bin Najjar, and there, near a small field, and this field, in fact, is known where people, there were farmers of date palms, and they used to dry the dates there. The camel stops, moves forward a little bit, and then Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then the camel turns around and then sits down here. And Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam now here makes an announcement. is there anyone who is from my family? Meaning from my maternal side, right? Um, Hazrat, Salma, who was the great great grandmother of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is there anyone here? And of course, Khalid bin Zaid, who is known as Abu Ayyub Ansari radiallahu ta'ala an, he comes forward and he says, Ya Rasulullah Sallam, you are welcome and we are honored to have you. And Rasulullah Sallam decides to stay in his, as mentioned in the riwayah, this two-story house. And initially, because people are coming and continuously, so Rasulullah Sallam decides to stay in the ground floor, and Abu Ayyub Ansari and his wife, they are staying upstairs. But after a few days, they realize that we are being disrespectful to our guest by staying on top of them, right? So they come down and they insist that, Ya Rasulullah Sallam, we cannot stay upstairs. We have to show the respect. Although Rasulullah Sallam insists that, I have people coming to meet me, so it is better for me to stay in the ground floor. But they insist that, they say, no, you have to move above, because we cannot uh, show this disrespect. And in the end, Rasulullah Sallam, because of their insistence, he moves up and then stays on the first floor. But however, people are coming to meet, and he finds some other place where he collects the people and talk to them. And of course, Abu Ayyub and his wife, they are trying their best to please the guest, the special guest, right, in every possible way. And the food, no, it is mentioned in the riwayat that he would prepare the food and then first send the entire food to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. After he has eaten, then whatever remains, it comes back to them, and then they eat from that. And in fact, Rasulullah, Abu Ayyub Ansari radiallahu anh, he is he's showing so much love to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that he, uh, out of this love and affection, he asks the people who are serving Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which part of the plate did the Prophet ate from, and then he would eat from that part of the plate, just to show his love and affection to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so after, now the start of the new era in Medina Munawwara is taking place. The camel where it sat, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam inquired that whose land this is, because this is a land which was being um, used by the farmers to dry the dates. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asked, and he discovers that it belongs to two orphans, and their main names have been mentioned, Sahal and Suhail, and they have, of course, they are both children, and they become Muslim, and they are the son of one of the leaders, Bani Ibn Amr, I think the name has been mentioned. So they, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he says that we want to buy now this land, because this is where we are going to lay the foundation of Masjid al-Nabawi, right? So this is the first masjid which Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is going to establish. And we find from this incident that a Muslim, wherever he goes, they have to actually the first thing they have to try and establish is the masjid, which is what Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is showing to the Sahaba. And he asks them, and the children are brought in front of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Of course, they are both Muslim now, and they say, Ya Rasulullah Sallam, we want to give this a gift to Allah Ta'ala, so that it can be used for the purpose of the masjid. But Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, no, I'm going to buy this place from you. And he buys the place, and that is the where the masjid foundation. And it's a quite a big piece of land, and this is the foundation of Masjid Nabawi right at the beginning. Uh, some figures have been mentioned. Approximately, for example, it was 100 feet by 130 feet. You know, almost like a bigger than a little bit of square. So that area, big area, which was, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he bought it, and he gave instruction to the Sahaba that this is where we are going to build. And to start with, we will cut all the trees in this area. There were a few trees in that area, although, as we mentioned, discovered that both Makkah Mukarrama and Medina Munawwara, they are both the part of Haram, and the definition of Haram is that there one is not allowed to cut or kill or do any harmful action is not allowed. Even you are not allowed to cut the tree or even pluck a leaf from the tree, all these things. But because the masjid is being built now, and the foundation is being laid, so now, first of all, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they cut all the trees and use those logs to make the walls of the tree of the masjid and the boundary of the masjid. And and that, and he himself is getting involved with the Sahaba, right? And of course, the just to show that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself is building the masjid, and of course to encourage the Sahaba, because the Sahaba, they are now feeling that as long as the Prophet is working, we cannot stop, right? So they continuously make the effort, and while they are building and constructing and doing the work of the masjid, they are, they had probably a custom in those days. They would sing some poetry or ashar, and some of the words which have been noted in the ahadith. Allahumma la aisha illa aisha al-akhirah, farhamil ansara wal muhajira. So they are rhyming some poetry, or that there is no no luxury and comfort except for the luxury and comfort of the hereafter life. This life is just temporary. And oh Allah, have mercy on the muhajir and ansar. So they're repeating these words, and then they are constructing the masjid. And mashallah, in a few weeks, a foundation is laid, and the masjid is built. And then the Sahaba, they start arranging their own houses around the masjid, right? So of course, first of all, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's house is built beside the masjid, and which is still the place where Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is now buried. That's the on the left side of the masjid. And and uh, and all around now on the outside. So they at mainly there were three doors, which are of the masjid. One of them was the known as the Bab Jibril, which is still there, and then there is a Babun Nisa. There was a door for the women, and then the other door, that's the gate. But apart from that, those Sahaba who built their houses around the masjid, there, if you like, they connected it to the wall of the masjid, so that their back door was leading into the masjid. So they would just, so at least there were probably mentioned around 6 or 12 at least houses which were built all around the Masjid al-Nabawi in the early days. And all of them, like Abu Bakr radiallahu anh had one, and Umar radiallahu anh, and so on. All of them, they built there, at least more than a dozen houses were all around, and their back door opened, so they would just enter the masjid from their back door, when the time of Salat comes. So this is how it was all laid down. And while this is happening, now the ayat of the Quran have come from Allah Ta'ala, in some of the ayat of Surah Nisa and some of the ayat in Surah Ankabut, and the different surah, where Allah Ta'ala is now first of all encouraging the people of Makkah, those Muslims who are there, that they have to migrate. And hijrat has become wajib. Allah Ta'ala has made it wajib and compulsory for every Muslim to leave Makkah now and migrate to Medina. And this obviously was a very tough thing for some of the people, and because you have all your belongings, your house and everything, and if you migrate, then you have to leave a lot behind. And some of the Sahaba, they were reluctant, but then when they received the ayat of the Quran, and initially Allah Ta'ala encouraged, and then some of the ayat in Surah Nisa, for example, came where Allah Ta'ala started sending warnings that those who will not migrate, there is a stern warning for them. And so, and these messages have been sent by Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to the people, and people are leaving. But there are a few, has been mentioned in the riwayat, a few people who probably, maybe they were showing themselves to be Muslims, but they were reluctant to come. And then the stern ayat of the Quran came, where they had to, but they still wouldn't migrate. But most of the Sahaba who were believers, and one special story has been mentioned about one Sahabi who was actually old and disabled, and in fact he was even blind also. And this is Junda ibn Damura. Junda ibn Damura radiallahu ta'ala, when he heard the ayat of the Quran that hijrat is wajib now, that we have to leave, but he was old and he requested people to help him, but no, somehow or other he managed to get some support and try to make the hijrah, and he managed to leave Makkah and arrive near Masjid Aisha, Masjid Aisha, which is still there now, where we can go and put the ihram on and then come back, enter back into Haram for an Umrah once we have arrived in Makkah Mukarramah. So he managed to somehow or other get support from people, but he is very feeble, very sick, and of course, because he is blind, he is unable to do anything by himself. But he feels that this ayat of the Quran, I have to implement it in my life no matter what happens. So he manages to leave the boundary of Makkah, arrives there near Masjid Aisha, and there unfortunately he dies. So now the part of the ayat of Surah Nisa which came, but then Allah Ta'ala then revealed a few more verses after that, that the hijrat is compulsory and an obligation on every Muslim, except for those who are weak and who are disabled. There was a small category which was given the flexibility that because of their illness and because of their disability or because of their weakness, if they are unable to migrate, they will be excused. Otherwise, the others are going to be punished. Allah Ta'ala, serious ayat of the Quran came, but this leave was given for, an exception was made for those people. But anyway, mashallah, all the Sahaba, most of them are migrating and arriving, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is laying the foundation. And then there is one incident where one of the Sahabi who became Muslim, but he was the only one in his tribe. His name has been mentioned, Fudaik. radiallahu anh, and he actually writes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that I am with my tribe. I am the only one Muslim. The rest of them are mushrik, and I'm living here with them. But I am able to perform my commands of Allah Ta'ala, fulfill the commands of Allah Ta'ala. What is the order for me, or what is the command of Allah Ta'ala? What should I do? Should I migrate and leave my family and everything because they are not Muslim yet? So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam now came back to him and instructed him that if you are able to fulfill the commands of Allah Ta'ala, and obviously the first command is the salat, 5 times salat. If you are able to perform 5 times salat without any problems and without any obstacles, and if you are able to obey the orders of Allah Ta'ala, the major orders of Allah, and lead an obedient life as a Muslim, then you are excused and you can remain with your family, right? So this special clause or instructions from Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was given, which actually, fuqaha and the jurists in Islam, like the 4 Imams, they have derived many special rules from that for people who, for example, are migrating to other countries and they are living in environments of kufr, they are living in Darul Kufr. What is the correct rule for them, right? And of course, this incident of Fudayk radiallahu anh, it tells us that there is some exceptions. For example, we are now living in the Western world, and this is what we have to do from the Seerah. We have to derive the benefits and look at what is the benefits of all this process of hijrah and migration. That Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, this incident told him to stay. So that means that gives us an option that if we are living, for example, in Canada or America, in the Western world, and we are able to freely follow the orders of Allah Ta'ala and fulfill the rights of Islam, and are able to make sure that our families are following the orders of Allah Ta'ala and are able to stay on Islam, then we are allowed. Right? So, fuqaha, they've taken out this ruling from these process of migration. So anyway, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam now is trying to establish the Masjid Nabawi, but of course, this Masjid Nabawi is still, it's in its initial stages. It's not a concrete construction. It's just a temporary situation where wood, logs, and wood has been used, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has covered only the front part of the masjid. And of course, don't forget initially the Qibla was towards the Jerusalem. So which was, and then when later on in the years, which the orders of Allah Ta'ala came, that the Qibla has to be now towards Makkah. So it was a totally opposite direction, right? Those who have gone to Masjid al-Qiblatan, they will know that it's like north and south basically. So before, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has covered one part which is towards the Jerusalem side, and this is where he is leading the salat. But then when the order comes that the now Qibla has to be changed, Allah Ta'ala sent the order in the Quran, and so now the Imam is now standing on the other side. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also covered that side temporarily, but this back side now, that because it was still covered, that became a small place for the Sahaba to stay there. And in fact, that became the famous Sufa, Ashab, and where the Ashab Sufa, the Sahaba would come uh, and sit there because there was a little bit of shelter there from the sun. And of course, the shelter which was put on top of the Masjid Nabawi also, this was to avoid the sun because it used to be so hot. But it was not a complete structure which would stop the wind or the rain to come down and stop that. So, and we find that many around the, I think the it's written in the history that around the 8th year of Nabuwa, when uh, when it rained quite badly, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was performing the Salat in Masjid Nabawi, and because of the rain, it started dripping the water, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he went into Sijda, mud was his forehead was covered with mud. But of course, the order of Allah Ta'ala is that we have to do the Sijda. It doesn't matter. So, so this is how the initial state of Masjid Nabawi is, and now the Islam is being taken from there and being spread all over the world, and the foundation has been laid of the Masjid Nabawi. Sahaba have surrounded all the around, but Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, before passing away, he asked all the doors which were, the Sahaba who had built their houses around the masjid. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asked all of the doors have to be closed, shut down. So there should be no one is allowed to now come in to the masjid from the back side. All the doors except for one, Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala. He said that he leave this one open only. And this was obviously a message to all the Sahaba that he by way ulama have written that by saying that he is showing to the Sahaba that he will be the next person in line, next Khalifa. Uh, so he allowed only one Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's house door to be opened into the masjid. Apart from that, all the others were closed before the demise of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And inshallah, how the Ashab Sufa and all the other things develop. I think we have reached the end of the time now, inshallah. So we can, inshallah, continue next week. May Allah Ta'ala give us the ability to follow the Sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun alal mursaleen, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Jazakallah.